Hello and welcome to Sideways. This week we're talking about labels and we're trying to decide whether they're useful for people or best left in the supermarkets.
So, what do you want to talk about this week?
Well, I wanted to talk to you really about labels.
Well, like designer labels?
Well, no, not really. Not the itchy ones.
Right,
no,
okay.
the itchy ones.
Because I cut them out usually.
Yeah, but that makes it worse sometimes, doesn't it?
Sometimes you can rip them out.
It leaves a little sharp ridge along the back, or especially the ones around the side, which around near your midriff, which again they chafe.
Yeah, then you have to unpick the stitching. From the label,
you do, and it's not right, is it?
No. Anyway, that's not the label.
It's not the label we're talking about.
Okay.
I'm talking about labels on people, really. You know, do they help or do they hinder?
And what you mean? So labels like alcoholic?
Yeah, that's one of them, or anything, or
depressive,
any sort of label, especially the mental health issue ones. Yeah. I mean, are they? I don't know. What do you think? Do you think they're useful, or if they are counterproductive?
Well, I suppose they might be useful in terms of diagnosis in some respects, but I don't think they're particularly useful in any other respect.
No, I don't. I mean, it's. I remember. I remember going to my GP, and I was about 4 months sober at the time. I went to see him, and he was the GP that was responsible for getting me off to Kenwood Trust, and so he started the ball rolling in many respects. After I'd been speaking to him about the honesty came out about my alcoholism, etc., and the level I was drinking. And I remember this was about four months after I'd originally gone to see him, and he spun his computer screen round that was on his desk and said, "Yeah, just take a look at this." And in there it said that I couldn't read it all, but the last few notes in there were saying that I'd been into the surgery and I was stinking of alcohol and in a pretty depressed state, in a pretty bad way. Before he'd come to the conclusion, my drinking had got to a problematic level, and he was going to send me off to Kenwood Trust. And at the 4 month mark, I remember being quite happy with the fact that he said, "Do you know what? You look disgustingly healthy today. Off you go." And as I was going out, he said, "Do you have access to your medical records? Because you can now look at them and get them all online." And I said, "No, I haven't, but I'll be quite interested to have a look."
Yeah.
And so he gave me the details about how to do it. And I remember a couple of days later, when I got round to have a look at it online, I suddenly realised that in my notes there, I'd been given a syndrome.
Oh.
Yeah. I was which was alcohol dependency syndrome, ADS. I'd never had one before. I'd never had a label, never had a syndrome, and so it was.
Were you pleased?
Not really. I didn't really want it on my medical records, I suppose, initially.
Okay.
I thought, what's that doing there? Once it's there, isn't it? But all the notes before that were leading up to that sort of diagnosis anyway. And I felt that it was quite a soft approach to the word alcoholic, which at the time I thought was a terrible thing to be labelled, and I think most people would find it a difficult label to have attached to them.
So do you find that most people in group, so most people in recovery, dislike the appellation alcoholic?
I think initially, yeah.
Right.
I think they do, but you come to terms with it, and it's strange because when you go to the fellowship meetings, particularly AA, obviously, you confirm at every juncture when you're in the meeting there, before you say anything at all, you introduce yourself and say your name, say, "I'm an alcoholic."
Yeah.
And that I find a little bit strange, that it's a constant reaffirmation of the condition I have. I don't find it particularly disturbing or perturbing. Again, it's something I've got used to. But it seems weird that after all these years, I'm still using that particular title.
It's not only that you're using that title, it's also that in some ways, and I suppose this is one of the dangers of labels, in some ways they can become the way you define yourself or the way other people define you, as if that's all you are. I think I'm right in saying that was one of the things that you always struggled with AA, wasn't it? The fact that it's you can't escape from that label. In fact, I had a client recently who said to me that sometimes, in his case, he goes to CA, he goes to
Cocaine Anonymous.
Cocaine Anonymous. I couldn't remember the name of the drug. It's quite weird, isn't it?
Been to those myself.
I don't know what that says about me. So he says that sometimes when he goes to CA, he feels as if, in some respects, his recovery is even harder because he's kind of immersed in this kind of constant focus on addiction.
Yeah, I know. It is something which certainly at our peer support groups, we don't tend to use labels like that. And again, we get a number of people that come in that do find it a little bit tricky sometimes at AA meetings, that they do have to do that and feel they're perhaps, I don't know, confirming the stereotype. It seems almost like...
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that do you know, whenever an AA meeting is sort of shown in films, etc.
Yeah,
it's a lot of it is quite true of what they say, but it's always people standing up saying, "Oh, I'm such and such, and I'm an alcoholic," and I think people have almost made fun of that in the past.
Right. Okay.
So it's something when you do go to AA meetings, you find out it's actually real. That's what they do.
So you think that because it's so, in some respects, well known that there's, do you think there's kind of shame attached to it then?
Yes.
Right. Okay. And obviously, shame is kind of unhelpful in recovery, isn't it? Because it's one of the things that you're trying to get rid of. But I suppose the counter argument to that would be that it's a balance between not repressing that shame, but being able to deal with it. I don't know. What's your?
I think there is a lot of shame attached to using that particular phrase, that title. And I think, do you remember when I came to your continual professional development day down in Battle, and I came down there to meet a lot of your fellow psychotherapists and psychiatrists, etc. And one of the chaps there, he asked me about exactly this, about the term, whether if I found out it was uncomfortable with the term alcoholic. And if I remember rightly, I said to him, no, I'm not particularly uncomfortable as long as it's not used in the pejorative.
Yes.
And I think it is used as a way of putting people down.
Or like filthy alcoholic.
Exactly. Exactly, yeah. Especially if it's, if you put that in front of it.
Yeah.
To give it a little bit more oomph.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think that most people will fight shy of labelling themselves that, certainly.
Yeah.
I think it's quite interesting as to whether, when a label is thrown into the mix, how much it affects the person receiving that title and the person that's giving it, because it changes the perception. It's a bit of a different dynamic between the two people at that time.
So, do you think it makes a difference whether someone has applied the label to themselves or whether it's been given to them by somebody else?
Yeah, I think if once you give it to yourself, you tend to be quite comfortable with it.
Yeah.
When it's hoisted upon you, it can be a little bit different. Because I know, again, going back to my GP, and again, I think it was just something we discussed down at the CPD day, was that the softer terms are available, if you like.
Yeah.
We come across alcohol dependent and alcohol dependency syndrome. And some people use it, and certainly in America they use it a lot more, as an alcohol body allergy.
Really?
Yeah, they do.
I've
yes.
never heard of that.
No, it's one that I've come across. I've come across it more than once, but it tends to be limited to when you're reading stuff or you're looking stuff up online or again on YouTube. It comes up quite a lot. They see alcoholism as an allergy to alcohol. It's a body allergy, so it's not just a physical allergy; it's a mental allergy.
But don't you feel like that? I don't know. I've never heard that phrase before, so I haven't had a chance to kind of think about it. But I don't know. There's something about that feels as if it's almost gone too far the other way. Aren't you? You're almost being a bit mealy-mouthed about it, a bit sort of. I don't know. We've spoken a lot about how one of the necessities for recovery from anything is your ability to confront something, be honest about it, say, yeah, look, this is what's going on here. Surely there's a danger of going too far the other way and sort of almost kind of pretending it's something that's over here that isn't part of you, that you don't have a responsibility for. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I do. I agree. I think that there's a middle ground there somewhere. And I'm quite happy with the original term we discussed as being an alcoholic, as long as these days I use recovering alcoholic as something to define me, if you like, or define where I am.
But do you feel like it defines you full stop? I mean, surely you feel as if there is more to you than being a recovering alcoholic.
Yeah, I do, but that's quite an interesting point, because I think that when you first go into recovery, you're quite proud of that title. Yeah. And it does define you, and it has to define you. The early period of recovery, which is normally probably the first 12 months, you've got to give everything to recovery. Nothing else can get in the way. So I think it's very apt to call yourself a recovering alcoholic at that time. Now, the thing is, with that particular term, other people see it as you're probably still drinking but trying to give up.
Oh, okay.
They see it as that. They see it as you're a recovering alcoholic. You're still imbibing, but at some point, you hopefully you're going to get into abstinence.
But that's just a misunderstanding.
It's an outside perception.
Yeah,
it is a misconception. But as you get later on, I don't see myself as being defined by my condition anymore. No. I think the number of years I am now into recovery, it's a part of me. It's a big part of me, but it's no longer the defining part. And the same with everything, and I'm sure you give this advice to a lot of the people that come to see you, but it's about getting a balance in your life. So the amount that I put into my recovery, I think now is about right. With the meetings I attend and the self-analysis I still do on the condition, it's pretty much balanced now with everything else that's going on.
But in a sense, I would say you're quite a good example of what happens when someone who's had problems with addiction turns some of the qualities that are synonymous with addiction to the good, because we've discussed before how if alcoholics can use their destructive habits in a positive way, they're pretty much unstoppable because they're very resourceful, they're very determined.
Yeah. And
so, in a way, you're kind of like that now, aren't you? Because you have a thirst for knowledge about the condition. You, from my observation, are someone who is very good at kind of upping your focus on recovery at times when you're struggling and you kind of need it, and then you can pare it back down again when life feels a bit better and you can concentrate on other things. So you seem to do that very effectively.
I think so. Again, that's only come with time. It's something that most people, once they've achieved abstinence, is to getting that balance back in their life. And I've found that taking a real interest in my condition has made it very. It's made it a journey which is a journey of knowledge, not just about myself, but a journey of knowledge into the condition and all other aspects that are associated with it. So I'm sort of enjoying it.
But that's what I mean. It's kind of, there's a focus there, isn't there?
Yes.
Which at one time was on when can I get some vodka?
Yeah, exactly.
And now that focus is on something that keeps you healthy and living a more sustainable, enjoyable life.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we always say in groups, again, it's a little bit cliched now, but if we did put half the effort into our recovery as we did making sure we didn't get caught with our vodka or a drink or our drugs, and the effort we made in actually obtaining them, then we'd be half the way there. Yeah. We really would, making a real inroads into it.
There was something you said earlier on about, you said when people first go into recovery, recovering alcoholic is actually a label that they quite like, perhaps quite proud of, which reminds me of something else about labels. One of the other problems, I think, with labels is that we can, and sometimes unconsciously, but we can use them to our benefit. So, for instance, you can use a label of depression or anxiety to enable you to avoid getting better and changing.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of secondary gain there for you, because if you tell yourself, no, that's it, I'm too depressed, or no, that's it, I'm someone who will always suffer with terrible anxiety, so you kind of define yourself like that. One of the things you do is you prevent yourself from changing, you prevent yourself from getting better, because effectively what you're saying to yourself is, look, this is how I am. It's almost implicit, this is how I was born and I'm always going to be like that. So it kind of stops you from feeling a desire and a thirst to real, or a belief in your ability to change and get better. And in some respects, it's also quite convenient because it gets you out doing stuff.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I've known a number of people that have, and in fact, I remember seeing on EastEnders. Do you remember when? Yeah, it's many years ago now, when Phil Mitchell, obviously, his alcoholism came to the fore, and when he was getting into trouble with Sharon and other people in the plot, said, "Well, you know, I'm an alcoholic. This is what I do best."
Right. Okay.
So he was using that. You know, this is what I have to deal with. You know, you deal with it too.
Yes.
So I think it's quite interesting. But what I find interesting also, what I find quite fun now, is I quite enjoy telling people I'm an alcoholic just to see their reaction. I like this awkward silence. You know, like,
because people don't know what to say.
Yes, they do. I mean, it's one of those things that people find it really difficult to come to terms with. So I find it quite fun. But you get those awkward silences. You know, in The Office, where Ricky Gervais is playing David Brent, and he'll make a joke, and there's this awful silence,
and it feels tense,
and it feels really tense. I can recreate that just if I'm feeling in that sort of mood. I can recreate that in certain circumstances.
Right, I wondered who it was you were going to liken yourself to this week.
Oh, Ricky Gervais. Well, no, I'm not.
Now you're Ricky Gervais.
No, he hasn't got an alcohol problem, so I'm not.
Well, not as far as we know.
Well, not as far as I know, but we do create the same awkward silences, which I find brilliant. But it just gets me out of a tight squeeze sometimes.
Well, what do people say to you then when you tell them that?
They really don't know what to say. I tend to do it with people I don't know very well. Normally, if I want to I probably want to finish.
It's quite an icebreaker.
It's either an icebreaker or it gets rid of them.
Right.
It stops them talking.
It reminds me of the time you didn't you go out for a kind of Christmas drink with some friends last year, and you sat next to a guy who asked you why you weren't drinking. Do you remember that?
Yes, it was.
Was that last year?
I can't. It may well have been. And if you're referring to the time where the guy said, when I said, I'm not drinking because I'm an alcoholic, and he said, "Christ, I thought you'd been flat out on it then. If you're an alcoholic, you love drink." And so he didn't quite. I did actually bother. I was sat next to him at a dinner table, so I did actually go on to explain that I was in recovery, etc. So I didn't just leave that one hanging, because I could have had real fun with that one as well. But going back to those labels, I mean, labels, they're resistant to change, aren't they? They really are resistant to change.
Well, that's exactly what I was just saying. You know, the danger of a label is once you tell yourself this is what I am, this is what I've got, this is what I'm dealing with, you kind of make it true. That's your truth. I am this, and when you hear yourself say that, you do make it harder to shift. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I do, and I think that sometimes you can. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Sometimes, I know several people that have complained when their children have had a diagnosis of ADHD, for example.
Right.
All of a sudden, their behaviour becomes worse.
Right.
Because all of a sudden they've got an excuse as to why they're behaving like they are, and a reason why they're behaving like they are. In fact, we did have someone a girl come into groups, and her child had been diagnosed with dyspraxia.
Yeah.
And she says he's just clumsy, but he'd been diagnosed with dyspraxia. But all of a sudden, that gave him a reason for his behaviour to change. It wasn't until the label was applied that he then changed as a person, which is weird, isn't it?
In terms of the beliefs we hold about ourselves, the one thing that we're absolutely wedded to is that we want to be right. So if you have a belief about yourself that you're worthless or unlovable or hopeless at relationships or depressed or anxious, the one thing you definitely want to be is right. And so you'll become absolutely stellar at finding all the evidence that proves that you're right, and you'll become brilliant at ignoring all the evidence to the contrary.
That makes sense. Good. It does make sense.
Glad it makes sense.
It does make sense. I was looking at a YouTube clip the other day, and it was this guy. You know the TED Talks, which I've always found fascinating.
Love a TED Talk.
And there's TEDx Talks as well, which is sort of I don't know what they are. We do a slight variation on the theme, but there's a guy called John Snow on there, and he's a psychology professor from the Lafayette College in the USA, and he was talking about labels, and he was saying that labels are bad, but labels are for food and not for people, and they shouldn't be used at all. And he's going on to a different. He was quite evangelical in his approach to labels.
Like Billy Graham.
A bit like Billy Graham in a different way, but he was talking about, as an example, he said if you use the term weeds, for example, weeds in the garden. Now you see weeds, it gives you the impression of sort of troublesome, ugly foliage, and he's going on to explain that like blue violets and dandelions, they're weeds, but they're quite beautiful flowers. So that's a label.
Didn't someone once say that weeds are just plants growing in a place you don't want them?
I think, yeah. Do you know who said that?
Well, I just did.
You just did it, but
I don't know who originally said it.
No, I don't. Well, I'll give you another one then, right? See if you can guess who said this. Right? Weeds are flowers too. Once you get to know them.
I've got no idea.
No idea. Winnie the Pooh.
Oh,
Winnie the Pooh.
Well, that's proper.
That's philosophy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's proper philosophy. Isn't it?
Yeah, he's one of the greats, isn't he?
Definitely.
One of the great post-Socratic philosophers.
Definitely not a bear of very little brain.
Yes, so labels are. We find that across everything. What would you say what do you think? What's the image that's thrown up if I say Millwall fans to you?
Oh, well, I don't like them. Violence. Obviously.
Violence, exactly.
Yeah, obviously,
exactly. And there's a guy I used to do business with, and he was one of the most placid guys. He was a manager of a local insurance company, so his team used to come to me to try and do business with me. Yeah. And he was a very mild guy. In fact, he was probably way too nice to be a manager. But he was an avid Millwall fan.
Yeah.
He'd been to every Premier League ground, every ground in the top four divisions to see Millwall play. All right, so he was absolutely fanatical, but he was most unlike any other Millwall fan I'd ever come across. Or, once he said he was a Millwall fan, I expected a certain type of person, and it just wasn't. It's completely different. So labelling all Millwall fans as the same is obviously wrong. I was just picking them just as an example because they do have this particular.
Yeah, you lured me into your.
I did
trap,
into your trap. I did a little bit.
Yeah.
But going back to when I was young, did you ever find you were searching for a label? I don't mean looking for a Calvin Klein or an Armani top in the charity shop that was a bit tasty.
No, I don't think so. The only label I had when I was at school was Pillsbury Doughboy.
I can see the resemblance, but knowing you at that stage, obviously,
which was very unkind.
It was very unkind. You've lost a little bit of timber since then.
Yeah. So I don't think I searched for a label, but I probably was given. I think we are given labels, aren't we, as children? But I don't think I searched for one actively.
Do you reckon there's a difference between a label and an identity?
Well, yeah, there is a difference, but I think a label feeds into your sense of self, doesn't it? Your sense of identity. I mean, when we're talking about identity, we're really going down a very, very, very deep rabbit hole.
Yeah, we are. But I mean, sort of on the surface. But I was really pleased when I sort of started to get an identity of growing my hair long.
Oh yeah, I remember
wearing
that.
a leather jacket, getting a motorbike, and then hanging out with those people that looked exactly the same. But I felt there was a real comfort in that at that time, and I think that. You remember the film Quadrophenia, and I was quite fascinated with that film. It was, I thought it was quite a great look at the sort of 60s cultures, and I think Phil Daniels, who played the main character in the film, he was talking about it a couple of years later after the film had been a real hit, and he said that he saw it as one person's search for an identity, and I identified with that.
But that's different from having a label, don't you?
It is, yeah. But it was something I physically wanted at that time. It's something like I went out and sought.
Yeah.
I sought solace in that.
So you sought the identity as a biker.
Yes.
But you didn't really want the label of alcoholic.
No, I didn't know. That's the difference between the two. One I particularly searched for, and the other one just landed on my desk.
Yeah. Your identity is nothing more than what you believe about yourself.
I think we could do a whole episode on that, really, couldn't we? I think there's a lot of stuff in
We
there.
can't do it tonight though because I've got to feed the dog.
Absolutely right. Yeah, I don't want Daisy to go hungry. Yeah, bless her. Oh.
Okay.
Should we call it a day then?
I think so.
Excellent.
All right. See you next week.
Cheers, mate.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Sideways was created by Graham Landy and Martin Pankhurst. If you want to read more about our work, visit grahamlandywellbeing.co.uk/sideways. You can also follow us on Twitter, and you can email us to let us know what you think of the show. Finally, we want to thank you for listening and ask that if you've enjoyed what you've heard, that you spread the word. And we'll see you next week.